Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is Dr. Halimah, and today's lecture is number 6, and the title of our lecture today is Methods of Translation. I hope that this lecture will be interesting to you, but before that we would like to identify and make sure that you come out of this lecture with good learning outcomes. Now, by the end of this lecture, you should really be able to show what? To show knowledge of the major methods of translation. And you should be able to practice these methods while translating. And you should be able to differentiate between these two major methods, semantic and communicative methods in translation. So you need 3 things, important ones. Okay? To understand these methods, be able to practice them, differentiate between semantic and communicative. And I will talk in this lecture about the following points. It's always important to know in advance what the lecture will contain. Now, first of all, I'll give you introduction to the translation method. And then I will tackle the point which says dichotomy of translation emphasis. And then I will go through 7, 8 methods of translation. Number 1, word-for-word translation method, then literal translation method, then faithful translation method, then semantic translation method, then adaptation translation method, then free translation method, then idiomatic translation method, then communicative translation method. And then I will end the lecture with some comments relating to these methods. All right? Now let's start with a bit of introduction. It is very important to understand that methods of translations have been in discussion, in debates for centuries, to be honest. And to translate literally or freely has been a problem of translating since the 1st century BC. 1st century BC, it means 2000 years. For 2000 years, people are arguing, what shall we do? Shall we translate freely or shall we translate literally? Let's wait until the end of the lecture and then you decide yourself. Then up to the 19th century, the free translation was favored. People until the 19th century, I mean since the beginning until 19th century, people, writers, translators preferred free translation. It means you are free to translate. And we will come to the definition and we will come to that point what we mean by free translation and what we mean by literal translation. Then at the turn of the 19th century, as a result of these cultural anthropological studies, writers started to really move towards literal translation. Again, we will talk about it in due course. But to be honest, this argument between shall we translate literally or freely is mainly theoretical. But what they missed was the purpose of the translation, the nature of the readership. It means the nature of the people to whom you are translating, and the type of text. You know, all these issues were not considered. That's why people theoretically argued, shall we translate freely or shall we translate literally? This is a little introduction about, the methods of translation. Now, the second point, which is very, very interesting, I like this dichotomy. If you really understand this part of the lecture, you will be able to understand really all methods. Now, what do we mean by dichotomy of translation emphasis? We mean differences, two parts, splitting two parts. Emphasis means focus. I focus on, look at these two dichotomies. Source language emphasis, it means source language focus. Let's say source language Arabic, all right? It means you are giving more focus to the Arabic text than the English text. But if you want to give more focus for the translated text or the English text, then it is called target language emphasis. Do you understand? It's very important to understand. Source language emphasis, it means you want to take the side of the target language. It means you want to be biased. It means you want to be in favor of the source language, let's say Arabic. But if another translator say, no, I would like really to give focus to the translated text because we would like to inform these English people or English-speaking people, whether they are Chinese, Russian, whoever, means those who can understand English, we would like to give them more focus. In this case, you say, okay, target language emphasis. Now, you can see the split. If you are going to emphasize on the source language text, then we have the following methods: word-for-word translation, literal translation, faithful translation, semantic translation. If you want to give focus, if you want to give an emphasis to the source language, then you have to use these four methods. But if you are of the opinion that you prefer to emphasize on the target language text, then you need to use the following methods: adaptation, free translation, idiomatic translation, and communicative translation methods. So this is very important, and it's really simple, and it helps you understand all these methods. Now what we will do, we will take each method on its own to explain to you what we mean by these methods. Now, most of the translators, or let's say beginners, they translate literally, word for word. Word for word, it means like it is interlinear. Otherwise, you put words under each other. Means the source language word order is preserved, and the translated words singly by their most common meanings out of context. In other words, you want to translate, let's say, in Arabic. We have a proverb in Arabic. I'm sure most of you know this proverb. Illi fat mat. Now, illi fat mat, if you translate it literally, word for word, look at it. That what passed died. Now look at this. Illi, that, li means alladhi fata, what passed, fata, died. Now this is word for word translation. It is out of context. It doesn't mean anything to an English speaker. If you say to him, the what passed died, you know, he would smile away. He say, what do you mean? The what passed died? No way. So it doesn't mean anything to him. Why? Because it doesn't have doesn't have sense, you know, doesn't make sense. Now, this is what we mean by word translation method, which of course I don't advise you to do. Now, but why do people use it? They use it to understand the mechanics of the source language. This is one use of it. And to be able to understand, to construe, to understand a difficult text. And this method is used before translation, pre-translation process. Okay? So this is word-for-word translation method. And this is an example, and it's clear. Now, the second method, again, this emphasizes the source language. Literal translation. What is a literal translation? Means the source language, grammatical constructions are converted to their nearest target language equivalents. But still, the lexical words are translated singly. It means one by one, out of context. You know, you use the grammar, but the words, they don't make sense. A bit, but let's see this example. مثل هذه الأشياء عليها إقبال كثير الآن. This is an Arabic text, you want to translate it into English. Now, if you want to translate literally, then look at it. مثل, the likes of these things, هذه الأشياء عليها إقبال, have much demand. Now, the likes of these things have much demand now. Again, the native speaker or the English language speaker would frown at it. He say, okay, what do you mean? So it's not clear either, but this is a literal. This is an example of literal translation, which, well, I mean, most of you, if you go to Google and you put a sentence like this, this might come up like this. I didn't go to Google, but you can try and see how Google would translate it. Now, this is the literal translation. Now, if you move a bit higher than the literal, faithful translation. Now, what does faithful translation mean? It means to reproduce the precise contextual meaning of the original with the constraints of the target language grammatical structure. It means to be faithful, to be completely faithful to what? To the intentions and the text realized of the source language writer. In other words, you have the text in Arabic, so please be faithful to its meaning. Don't change the meaning of the text. And try to understand the intentions of the writer. Okay? So you need to be really faithful. And the same example, look at this example. Again, I mean, I used the same example just to give you the chance to compare all these methods using one example. Imagine. You see, one example can be translated in, let's say, 5, 6, 7 times, the same, but different translation. And this is the beauty of translation. You cannot have two translators producing the same translation. Very rarely, very rarely. Now, this is how you translate if you want to use the faithful translation method. مثل هذه الأشياء عليها إقبال كثير الآن. Now, see, things like these, okay, are in great demand now. Now I can understand. Things like these are in great demand now. All right, you know, English native speakers will be able to understand. English-speaking people would be able to understand what you mean. If you say to them, look, things like this are in great demand now. Say, well, this is faithful translation. Now, this is the most common or arguable or debatable method, semantic translation method. It is more or less like a faithful, but it differs from a faithful translation by what? It gives more focus, more account on the aesthetic value. In other words, the beautiful and natural sound of the source text. It gives the beauty of the source text more attention. The faithful procedure is uncompromising. It means if you say to me, look, I want to be faithful to the source text. I'm not going to, sacrifice the meaning and the intentions of the writer for the beauty or the colorful aspect of the text. So this is the slight difference between faithful and semantic. The semantic approach, is concerns with the meaning of the text and gives the translators intuitive empathy with the original. I mean, it is okay. It is. I don't want to say this is better than the faithful, but each method really has its own advantages and disadvantages, has its own good things and bad things. Now, the same example, if we want to translate it using the semantic translation method, then we have to do it like this. This kind of thing is in great demand at the moment. This kind of thing is in great demand at the moment. Now, people pronounce it, this kind of things in great demand at the moment. I did not want, I could, for instance, delete the IS and put apostrophe S as if I was pronouncing. This kind of things in great demand at the moment. This is a very good translation. There is no problem with this. This kind of thing is in great demand at the moment. This is how people, speak, more or less. These four methods give more emphasis to what? To the source language or the target language? To the source language. Remember, this first dichotomy. They give emphasis to the source language. It means to Arabic. They want to translate the Arabic text and gives it more emphasis than the target text. Now, let's move to adaptation. Now we have started with people who would like to give more emphasis in their translation to the target language, to English. All right? Now, the first method of translation is, if you want to translate from English into Arabic or from Arabic into English, you can use this adaptation method. Adaptation method is the freest form of translation. It is really not a translation, to be honest, but it is. They call it a translation, but it is very, very freely translated. In other words, it is used only with if you want to adapt, if you want to convert. Let's say if you want to convert one text or one novel or one play, one story from English into Arabic, and you don't want to be bothered about translating it into Arabic literally or semantically or faithfully or whatever, you just take the plot, the characters, the themes, and then you put it in your own words. This is adaptation. You adapt it from English into Arabic or from Arabic into English. Now, a very good example you could look at it like here. If you want to translate Shakespeare's play King Lear, I don't know whether you have read King Lear. It's a beautiful play. Very sad. Very. They call it tragedy. I mean, it's a tragedy. One of the greatest tragedies of Shakespeare. Now, somebody among you would say, "All right, I'm going to translate King Lear, but in my own way." All right, what would you call it? You say, "All right, I will call it الشيخ الغني الأعمى وأولاده الثلاثة." King Lear. If you know the story of this play, you know what I mean by saying الشيخ الغني الأعمى وأولاده الثلاثة. King Lear was king, but he was blind, and he has 3 daughters, you know, and he wanted to distribute his possessions among them. I don't want to tell you the story. I leave the story for you, but it's a very nice and sad story. A beautiful tragedy. Now, I would, if I want to really adapt, means take the theme, the character, and the plot of this play, and you say to me, "All right, I'm going to do it in Arabic, and I am going to act it in one of our theaters." Then in this case, you give it a different name. You say الشيخ الأعمى وأولاده الثلاثة. It keeps the same theme, but a little different, you know. So adaptation, the freest. So this is the adaptation method in translation. But people call it adaptation method in translation. But to be honest, it has nothing to do with translation. But you know, you decide whether it has something to do with translation or not, but this is one way of saying it, the freest. I mean, probably it has 10% of the original text, or 5%, or 2%. It depends on the text you are doing, really. Now free translation, the free translation is you reproduce the matter without the manner or the content, without the form of the original. This approach normally paraphrase. It gives more information. It is too much talk, you know, free. You are free to translate it in a way that is pretentious, means it is not really that literal or faithful or semantic or whatever, but you say the example would give you an idea what we mean by free translation. مثل هذه الأشياء عليها إقبال كثير الآن. If you say it, but this one is dead trendy. You go into a shop and you say this shirt is dead trendy. It means, or this one is dead trendy. It means that fashionable, everybody is buying it, and you know it is good, and so on and so forth. So it has a reputation of being good. So people starting to use it, whether it is washing up liquid, or a T-shirt or whatever. It is trendy. It means it's fashionable. It is modern. It is it is what everybody is using. So when you translate مثل هذه الأشياء عليها إقبال كثير الآن, in a way like this one is dead trendy, means people understand you right away. This is free translation, but it's really everyday language, and it's beautiful translation, of course, but you know, it's free. Now, idiomatic translation, the idiom, what is the idiom? Is a fixed figurative expression whose meaning cannot be deduced from the denotative meanings of the words. That makes it up. As in car racing, for instance, is not my cup of tea. I say to you, well, we are talking about car racing and so on. I like this car. I prefer this car to race that car, and so on and so forth. But I say to you, look, car racing is not my cup of tea. This is an idiom, because my cup of tea has nothing to do with car racing, but it is an idiom used in this context. Now, if you want to reproduce a message of the original text in an idiomatic English, or in you need to use really a different approach to translation. And the example, the same example, look at this example again. مثل هذه الأشياء عليها إقبال كثير الآن. Now this is an idiom. This types all the rage. This types all the rage. It means it makes people go mad. Wow. After this type of thing. That's why, you know, people are queuing. They want to get this this washing up liquid, or this T-shirt, or this pair of trousers, and so on and so forth. Why? Because it is very, 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 very popular, to the extent people are, wow, raging and running after it, probably fighting over it. And this is an idiom to express this this concept. مثل هذه الأشياء عليها إقبال كثير. Oh, this type is all rage. I can't get one. When I went to buy this type of T-shirt or this particular pair of trousers, then I couldn't get in. There was a long queue. What's the matter? So this type is all rage. Now this is an idiomatic translation. As you can see in the slide, I know it is lively, natural, you know, it's everyday language, it's colloquial, you know, people use it. It's your own choice of using it. Now, the communicative translation stands in paradox with the semantic approach to translation. It attempts to render the exact contextual meaning of the original in such a way that both context and language are readily accepted and comprehensible to the readership. You know, the communicative translation. The communicative translation takes into account the context and the meaning of the original. So the context is very important, and it has to give the translation, the text, its own communicative effect, communicative equivalent in the target language, communicatively. Now let's go back to our example, اللي فات مات. Now if there is an equivalent in the target language, then you have to use it in the target language. This is what we mean by communicative. You want اللي مات فات, you don't have to say the what past died. There is an equivalent in English. English people say, let bygones be bygones. If you say to an English person, let bygones be bygones, he would be very impressed. He say, wow, you speak good English, and you translated it, you have translated in a very good way. So this is communicatively. It means you communicate this message to the other person successfully. You are interested in the message to communicate it according to the context, the meaning, and the culture, and all this package, communication. All right? Now look at another example. ضرب عصفورين بحجر واحد. Again, there is an equivalent to it in English. To kill two birds with one stone. To kill two birds with one stone, ضرب عصفورين بحجر. Okay? So this is a very briefly I have given you some idea about the methods of translation that are that translators or people use them when they translate. Very briefly, people have written books on such ideas and such issues, and if you want to read more and to work more, there are so many references to refer to. But the last point I would like to very briefly as well to draw your attention to is that the main two translation methods nowadays are used or argued about are the semantic semantic approach to translation and communicative approach to translation. This is very recent, and people use it and talk about it. And semantic translation tends to be economical, whereas communicative tends to be more. And the semantic translation is written at the author's linguistic level. Communicative it means the semantic, you take into account the authors. The communicative, you take into account the reader. It means you prefer the reader rather than the writer. The semantic favors the writer of the text, but communicative favors the translated text. Semantic translation is personal and individual. The communicative translation is social and concentrates on the message and the main force of the text. These are very quickly. The semantic approach interpret, and the communicative approach explain. So this is very brief, so hopefully I have given you a general idea, very brief, about the methods of translation today, and I wish you all the best, and thank you very much.